I'm Dr. Rachel Griffiths. I'm with my father and partner in aquatics.
Dr. Tom Griffiths.
Welcome to the Drowning Files, where each week we share a lawsuit we've been involved in or another true story with suggestions to learn from these tragedies to save lives. What case do you have today?
Well, this case just recently settled, and I often say that, and we try to get the most recent cases. Please keep in mind that although this case settled last week, all the parties suing, the government in this case, and the defendants agreed on an amount to give the family, even though it settled last week. The accident occurred about 4 years ago, which is typical. 3 or 4 years ago is not long at all for these litigations to take place. We've been involved with some cases that were 10 years old. That is, the incident happened a decade prior to the settlement. This injury is like several we have discussed so far. Rachel, you were also a part of this because you made the inspection for me. And in this case, we had a young couple about to get married, planning on getting married in their early to mid 20s, attending a birthday party at this reservoir slash state park with several governmental agencies responsible for the park. Some people were responsible for the water in the lake. Other people were responsible for the grounds. And so it made for a very difficult lawsuit because trying to find out who was responsible for what was very, very difficult. Also making this lawsuit difficult was that in the United States, although we sue an awful lot, I mean, lawsuits are common for just about anything, it's difficult to sue a governmental agency because those governmental agencies often have immunity. Having said all that, this case is a catastrophic headfirst entry diving case where this young couple attended a birthday party for about 8 individuals were in attendance for a young woman who had her birthday. It might have been her 21st birthday. Awful lot of partying going on. The injured party had consumed alcoholic shots. We're not sure how many. He smoked marijuana and he took ecstasy just prior to diving headfirst into the water. He says he wasn't impaired. His girlfriend or fiance said he wasn't impaired, but certainly anyone having those 3 different types of substances probably was impaired. As you recognize, Rachel, the water level in this reservoir, which was a recreational lake for swimming and boating and wading, fluctuated an awful lot. And one of the difficult parts about this case was determining how deep the water was at the time of the injury, how deep the water was when he dove in that specific site. Another problem with this case was there were a lot of large boulders along the edge. Some people would call it riprap, to stabilize the shoreline. So as the water rose and fell, the beach didn't erode into the lake. So at about dusk, when the sun was setting, it was getting dark, these young people were partying. Most of the females were in tubes in shallow water in one section of the beach, and not too far away, but maybe 100 yards away, were these young males jumping and diving off the banks into the water. And they kept encouraging this young man who was injured to come in the water, come jump in, come dive in the water. And he resisted for a while, and eventually he just got up, walked to where they were, and dove into shallow water and broke his neck. And he was a very athletic male. He and his fiance were very active. They were very adventurous in their activities. They liked to hike and bike and mountain climb and so forth and so on. And so, with a head-first diving injury where the victim survives, the health care costs to maintain any quality of life at all for this individual over the course of his lifetime is millions and millions of dollars. And so these headfirst catastrophic cases can be $10 million, $15 million. I've had some that approach $20 million where there was a lot of negligence against the defendant, the person operating the facility. In this particular case, it's confidential. They can't tell me what it was. I imagine it was in the millions, but I'll bet you it was in the lower millions. 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, $5 million. Again, that sounds a lot like a lot of money to us and to the listeners, but to victims who have a son and a girlfriend who has her boyfriend in the wheelchair for the rest of his life, who's never going to recover, that's not much money at all. And so the claim was there was insufficient signage. There was some signage there at the entrance. It was written up in a brochure, the rules and regulations, no diving. But this was a big lake. Rachel, you were there, and the signs, I mean, you just can't put a no diving sign every 10 feet around this huge, huge reservoir. Along those lines, just because you have signs doesn't mean that the person is going to see it. If that person does see it, he or she has to recognize what the warning is. And then, of course, they have to abide by that warning. And so it was a lot about signage. And again, we don't know if the signage would have made a difference. But that's the case. That's the frustrating case we have today, Rach.
Well, what I was going to say too is there's pretty much, it's a rare occasion that it would be wise to dive into any open water. You pretty much want to stay away from diving into open water unless you're really familiar with it. It's really deep, and there could be a rock or something in the way. But usually you want to veer away from diving headfirst into open water, I would think.
That's a great point. Now, we've always known this. I mean, we know it because we're water safety specialists, but people who don't do what we do for a living might not recognize that. But in addition to rocks and boulders that are hidden underneath the surface of the water, a lot of these reservoirs and lakes that are person-made, man-made, if you will, have tree stumps where they cut down trees. They have old farmhouses and barns and fence posts under the surface of the water. They have barbed wire in a lot of these lakes. They just flood these lands when they build these reservoirs and recreational lakes. So you never know what's underwater. Now, I went way back in my library and looked for the first warnings against diving, particularly diving in the open water. And I found it and actually had the old book. Now, of course, I can't find the book. Now that I need it, I can't find it. But it was the American Red Cross Water Safety Manual from 1936. And that little book, American Red Cross Water Safety document from 1936, had a whole section on diving, how you never go in the water head first without checking the depth, checking for obstructions. I mean, reiterating what you just said a couple minutes ago, Rach, spot on. When it comes to the open water, you just can't be 100% certain if it's deep enough and if there are no obstructions. A lot of stuff in the open water, in the surf, the marine water, the oceans, and in lakes, oftentimes you'll have a log or another object that's partially submerged. It's not floating on the surface. It didn't sink all the way to the bottom. It's suspended between the surface and the bottom, and people will hit that. Now, here's a story I heard that I don't know if it's true or not, so don't take it to the bank and say that Dr. Tom said this. But I heard that someone was on a scuba diving boat, and after the dive was over, decided to dive in the water and struck a green sea turtle and broke his neck. That could be true. It could be false, but we see an awful lot of turtles in the Caribbean when we're diving, as you know, Rachel, and that could be true. But it just, whether it's true or false, it just reemphasizes the fact that you should always check the area that you're diving into and through.